Okay, one of the most common questions I get in and around the office is, what on earth are we going to do about ear infections? About 70% of office visits for the pediatric age group to a primary care physician is for an ear infection. Now, unfortunately, the way that we traditionally treat ear infections is way wrong. Let me unpack that a little bit. So, I believe that the best way to do that is to understand what causes ear infections and then get a better understanding of how to take care of the cause so that these kiddos can actually take care of their own body well. The most important doctor in any person's life is the doctor within. And so allowing your body to create the response, store the response, and be able to recruit that response later on when they get exposed to the exact same vector. So let's answer that question. What is the most common vector that then creates the opportunity for an ear infection? And I phrase that very specifically and we'll unpack why. So the most common vector that comes into a child's life that can allow for, if the kiddo cannot adapt well to it, may cause an ear infection. So it's called Staph aureus. Staph aureus is a bacterial vector, and so when a kid is exposed to Staph aureus for the first time, typically it does not have a planned route to care for and attack that and build an immune response for it. And so the body has to create one. And how we allow the body to create that is very, very, very important. So the Staph aureus comes into your child's body, and typically it comes in through the ear, and typically it gets down into the middle ear. So the most common ear infections are middle ear infections. And so two ways that you can typically see if that is an occurrence in your child's life is, number one, if you look straight into the ear, you'll notice that it is bright cherry red. That is an inflamed tissue. So that's number one. Number two, occasionally Staph aureus can present as a gold coloration, a little bit more gold than like your traditional like earwax when healthy. And so that's another thing that you can look for to identify, hey, does my child have an ear infection? Now, once you have identified that that's what it is, this is the most critical time right then. Most of the time in America, specifically, the way that we would treat it at that point would be a round of antibiotics. To be honest with you, there's a time and place for all medications. A lot of them are very good gifts, but we've just got to be more disciplined in when we use certain things, because most antibiotics are very non-specific, meaning they will attack the bad bacteria, but they'll also attack a lot of the good that your kid has already stored. Adults, if you don't treat with antibiotics for a long period of time, you have built a robust immune system and it's stored in your gut, and that allows you to then recruit those responses when you get exposed to the exact same vector again. I hope that makes sense, because that is really, really critical. If you allow yourself the opportunity to build that immune response, you store that and you can recruit it again. That's super key. So when we have children, we've got to allow them to have that opportunity as well. And believe me, I know I take care of hundreds of kids a week, and one of the toughest things to do is to see a kiddo with an active ear infection. That's how I meet a lot of children that we're taking care of. It is very, very tough to get in that valley with somebody and teach a mom or teach a dad how to actually let their body process this correctly. And so we talked about the vector. There's two other very, very, very common occurrences that allow your kiddo's body not to land at that solution state where they have designed an immune response. Those two things are neurological deficit and structural issues. Okay, so I'm going to break that down using our model here. So if you zoom in right here, you'll notice that the occiput, which is the back of one's head, is very closely related to the brainstem, and then C1, C2, and C3. Those upper cervical vertebrae protect some of the most critical tissues in your body. The brainstem's, close to 80 trillion nerve fibers. Most of those go up and around back into the head, so it controls your vision, controls the muscles of mastication, which is chewing. It controls speech. It controls your moods. It controls your sleep. I mean, a massive level of control happens here. And so if there is stress on the nervous system right there, that will downregulate the body's ability to recognize what the vector is that just infiltrated. And if it can't decide what just infiltrated, it's going to have a really hard time designing a plan to take care of it. So we've got to solve that first. The second one is structural. So if you look at anatomy, you'll notice the C1 vertebra, the very top one, right there at the top. It sits millimeters away from the eustachian tube, specifically in children, because in kids, your eustachian tubes are horizontal next to your occiput here. Over time, those eustachian tubes go like this. And so they're already at a structural disposition not to drain in the ears just because of development. And so our job is to make sure that even though they are at a structural disadvantage, making sure that that top bone in the spine has not shifted right or left. Because if it shifts right or left, then that can create stress on the eustachian tube, pressure on the eustachian tube, and create a structural obstruction, not allowing the ear to drain through the lymphatics and getting rid of these products as waste. And so those are the two primary things that we find that's missing in this equation. And if we can take care of kiddos' nervous systems well and their structure well, the beautiful thing about that is we get to avoid antibiotics a lot of the times, most of the times I'd say. And that allows our kiddos to grow a robust immune system so that when they are school age and we start another wave of exposures, they're able to then have the capacity to take on those new exposures, store those products, and just get healthier and healthier and healthier. We talk about it all the time. There's study after study after study that shows that we need to utilize a neurologically based care and a structurally based approach to make sure that our kids can build a robust immune system that turn into healthy adults. And so I hope that's helpful. If you have any questions specifically about ear infections, or how do you even measure the nervous system, how do you even assess the structure of our kid's spine, we'd be happy to jump on a chat with you. You can comment below, reach out to us via email. And we try to make ourselves available because the number one thing that we try to do is educate first, because it doesn't matter if you're watching this in Hawaii or you're watching this in the Northeast, we can provide you resources to make sure that you and your family are taken care of well. Thanks.